hanging out with you guys today. We have Beth Livingston here, and we also have Pete Chaneri today. We're going to be talking all about project management. Do you look at that? Wasn't that beautiful? Straight in, getting started with project management in your agency. Let me set the scene. Are you struggling with your project management? Do you have projects that get out of control? Do you have multiple website builds or multiple clients or multiple communications all going on at the same time, and you find it really, really hard to manage? Well, let's face it, we mostly start our businesses as people who have a passion for design or a passion for web development, but we don't necessarily have the tools, or we're not equipped for project management. And when you start introducing employees, you start introducing multiple clients and multiple projects, things can easily get out of hand. And thankfully, we have people like Beth Livingston. She is the main educator over at WP Roadmaps. I've had the honor and privilege also to submit content to her community there, along with a few other people within the industry. And you can check her out over on WPRoadmaps.com. But before we unleash Beth on you to teach you all about getting started with project management, let's do a round robin of the table and I'll let you know who's here. So let's start with you, Peacher.
Hello. My name is Beth Chaneri, and I am a UX and design expert and a Cloudways Maverick.
Excellent.
That's it.
Beth, I gave you a stonking intro, but feel free to add to it.
I'm Beth Livingston. I reside in Greensboro, North Carolina in the States, and I am the director and creator of the WP Project Managers Academy, where we teach you how to complete your projects on time, within budget, with the right features, without sacrificing profit.
I like it. And my name is Lee. I am the host of the Agency Trailblazer podcast over on agencytrailblazer.com and a fellow Cloudways Maverick with Peacher. So, Beth, without further ado, over to you.
Okay, great. So, hey, everybody, and thanks for joining this session. For those who don't know me, I have to do the obligatory thing about giving you a brief overview of my background, so you'll know that I know what I'm talking about. So I started life as a first grade teacher. And after I went back to school and got my master's degree in instructional design, I then became a training specialist. I later moved into technical writing, and then that morphed into being a business analyst. And for those who don't know, an IT business analyst basically translates from the product people to the programming people and back and forth. So people used to ask me what I did for a living, and I said, well, I translate geek. That's what I do for a living. And then I also started managing projects. Then in 2000, I started using WordPress in 2009 as sort of a side business. Then I left the corporate world in 2016, and that's when I formed the WP Project Managers Academy. And the reason that I did that is I started going to WordCamps, and everybody was struggling with all this stuff like scope creep. And what Lee said is exactly right. You know, most WordPress agencies or most digital agencies are homegrown. You start doing projects for your friends, and then or for yourself, websites, and then you do some for friends, and then you think, hey, this could be a business. So you can go out and get training on just about everything you need for running that business except project management, because it's all so stuffy and boring and theory, and there's no real practical advice. So that's why I created the Academy. And I'll tell you more about that at the end. So, and I speak a lot at WordCamps when they're running. I don't love the virtual events, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to seeing people in person.
Yeah,
okay.
We're missing people for sure.
Yeah.
We are missing them so much. I mean, WordCamps, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
going to Orlando for vacation, and I'm hitting up all the WordPress people in Orlando saying, can we get together for a drink? I just want to see you guys. So before we talk about how to get started with project management, let's talk about what a project really is. So this is according to the Project Management Institute. That's that stuffy group that makes everything really complicated and hard to understand. But it is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. So those things that are ongoing that don't really have an end date, they're not really considered a project. I mean, you have to have those tasks on your task list, but they're not really a project because a project has a definite end. So if that's what a project is, let's look at how you can get started by looking at some frequently asked questions that I get asked a lot. And one of those, the first one is, project management is so boring. Why do I need it anyway? Or I've also heard, I hate project management. I just want to build beautiful websites. And sometimes project management can be boring, but once you start seeing the results, it's not boring at all, especially for those people who are goal-driven or like checking things off a list. I mean, if you're like me, sometimes if I didn't add a task to a list, I will add it back after it's already done just so I can check it off. So for those folks, project management can actually be kind of fun. It's not the sexiest of topics, though. But to answer this question, why do I need it anyway? Let's look at what project success is. Project success, most experts agree that project success is getting your project completed on time, within budget, with an end product that meets the client's business requirements, but also that retains your planned profit margin. So you can get done on time and within budget a lot of times. The client's
Beth,
budget. Yes.
That's assuming that normal people plan a profit margin, because I can tell you from personal experience, from knowing lots of people, that planning a profit margin already puts you in a different category in terms of your, project management and planning.
Well, true. And then that always goes back to estimating. And, you need to estimate your margin as well as all the stuff you have to do. So that's a very good point. Plan your profit margin. It's the only way to have a sustainable business. So this is what experts agree, that this is what project success is. So if that's what project success is, then what is project management? Well, project management means managing the triple constraint. Now, this is the triple constraint. There's scope, there's cost, there's time. There's also resources, because you have to manage those too. But in terms of creating a quality product, you have to manage all three of these things. And then if you do that well, then you create a quality product and you end up with a successful project. There's a meme out there that about fast, cheap, and good. And when you click one, it makes the other one go down. Well, this works kind of the same way, because if you after you've settled everything, if you adjust the scope, that's likely going to affect the cost and the timeline. If you adjust the timeline, that's likely, for example, if you've got a drop dead date by which you absolutely have to be finished, sometimes you have to manage the scope and reduce the scope in order to meet the timeline. So it's kind of like that meme. But
it's one of my favorite memes, by the way, to send around on the Facebook forums.
Yeah. And so this seems pretty simple, right? But projects still continue to fail. They go over time, they go over budget, they end up with a product, but it doesn't actually meet the client's business requirements. And so why is that? Well, these are the 7 top reasons that projects fail. The first one is unrealistic or incorrect client expectations. Everybody complains all the time that my client doesn't understand. My client doesn't understand. And if they don't understand, it's your fault, because it's your job to manage client expectations, which bottom line is education. The next thing is inadequate estimating. So many people try to provide a price estimate after an hour-and-a-half meeting with the client. And that almost always ends up in rework and an estimate that doesn't reflect the actual cost of the project. So it's important to get better at estimating. And the only way to do that is to keep doing it and to abandon the crystal ball approach to estimating, where you say, okay, this is a 5-page website with this thing and that thing. And so it's probably going to take this many hours. So I'll just quote this amount. That's the crystal ball approach to estimating. And it just doesn't work. We all do that in the beginning, and that's okay. But and then going out and asking other people, what should I charge for a 5-page website? Well, it depends. It depends on how fast you can do it. It depends on what you quantify your hourly rate as. So that could be a whole session all in and of itself, is how to properly estimate. The next thing is poorly defined business requirements. Focusing on design, I'm sorry, Peacha, but if you focus on design first, rather than the business purpose of the website, which are the results that you want to achieve from this marketing tool called a website, and that's what they are. Websites are not art. Yes, we want them to look beautiful, but they're not art. They're designed to serve a business purpose. So
I actually think Peach might agree.
Lee knows me so well. So basically, Beth, absolutely, I agree, because in my view, design is not the beauty or the aesthetics of it. It's the planning, it's the user experience, and so on, and therefore the business requirements and the goals of the website. No website of mine gets designed without having those extremely clear, because without those, you don't have the strategy. You can't even have the looks of it. So yeah, we agree. Yeah.
Well, what I keep trying to tell my students to stop doing is to walking into a discovery meeting and the first question be, tell me about websites you like. Tell me about websites you don't like, because that has no bearing on the situation whatsoever. I don't care what the client likes. I care what the client wants to achieve with the website. You can ask those like and dislike questions later. It just shouldn't be part of that initial discovery. The next thing that makes a project fail is not getting paid for all you do. And this is a big thing with almost every agency. And it comes from making the mistake of doing an unpaid deep dive discovery, including all the detail in the proposal. And then when they get no response, or they find out the client took their proposal and went and got somebody to do it cheaper, well, that's a result of not planning and not getting paid for what you do. And then there's also scope creep, which we'll talk about later. So, actually, that's the next thing on the list. Scope creep is another reason that projects fail. And that's when you say, you know what, I'm just going to throw this feature in because I know the client will like it and I want to over deliver. Or the client asks you for something small and you go, I'll just throw that in. Because once you do that once, they're going to expect it every single time. So you can control scope creep with project management by implementing your change control process without exception. And my students get so tired of hearing me say without exception, because it is the case. So there are other gurus who will say, well, you need to give a couple of times and then you can get stringent. I don't think you can do that. I think you have to start from the very beginning, setting out what the process is, and here's where the line is drawn in the sand. Everything after this point is now considered a change.
It is hard as well, isn't it, to rein things back? If you overpromise right at the very beginning, to rein things back's harder. Whereas if you can set all of those right up at the very get-go, then there's the very clear delineation. And if you do a little bit extra because you want to be nice, that's actually appreciated more, but should not be the rule. Sorry, carry on. I'm just, amen, should have been what I said. Keep going, Beth.
No, that's fine. I'm loving that y'all are chiming in. It really, I'm going to tell when we get to the point where we talk about the change budget, I love it when you people have been doing this probably longer than I have, agree with me or adopt what I'm doing. There are two pretty big subject matter experts that have been doing this for over 25 years that have now added the change budget into their process. And they're just saying it works like a charm. And we'll get to that, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the next one of the 7 most common reason projects fail is content bottlenecks. And this is the number one thing that people complain about. How do I get content from my clients? How do I get my content from my clients? Okay, so the first thing, the best solution to that is don't get your clients to do the content. They suck at it. They don't know what to do. They're looking at a blank page. They may write okay for print material, but that's not exactly the same way you write for the web and so forth. But 9 times out of 10, especially with the small mom and pops, you've still got to worry about getting content from the client on time. But there are ways to make this happen by using project management. And I'll get to a little more detail about that later. And then the other thing is no risk mitigation plan. Well, the client not getting the content to you is an inherent risk to every single project. So why not call that out at the beginning of the project and say, look, we know this is a risk because it's a risk for everybody. You've got a business to run. You think you can get all this content done when we need it. But in case you don't, here's how we're going to mitigate that risk. Mitigate's a big fancy word for here's how we're going to plan to address that if it happens. So those are the 7 most common reasons. Sorry, I didn't mean to advance so quickly. Those are the 7 most common reasons projects fail. Now, I'm scrolling to the bottom of my notes here. Okay. So then we also need to talk about, well, so what are the benefits to your agency if you implement project management? And I should also say at this point that I created the WP Project Managers Academy. That's my niche because I'm a WordPress person and I know where my people are just about every weekend, or I used to. And now, and so that's why I niche down to WordPress. And there are a few nuances that are specific to WordPress, like plugins and themes. And you have to consider those in your project management process. But for the most part, project management is project management. It's the same for everybody. Okay. So it doesn't change. They change the names they call these project management methodologies like Agile or Six Sigma or Waterfall. They're basically the same thing. It's just how they rearrange the different activities. You still have to do the same stuff all the time. So that's important to remember if you start going out and looking at some of these formal methodologies. They're not all they're cracked up to be. Okay, so what are the benefits to you for implementing project management? Well, it's going to help you set those client expectations more effectively. Your projects are going to become way more predictable. You'll retain that ROI, your return on investment, for those who don't know what ROI stands for. You're going to stay within budget. You're going to get done on time. You're going to avoid scope creep, and you're going to resolve those roadblocks and issues more quickly and easier because you've got processes in place. Okay, so I had a lot more notes on here I don't need to say. So while project management might seem boring in the beginning, you can see from this list how your agency can benefit. And that kind of leads to our next frequently asked question, which is, what is the very first thing that folks should put into place to get started with project management? And that is something I just mentioned, which is a methodology. You need some sort of framework to follow in terms of how you're going to do project management. And there are a lot of methodologies out there. I mean, you've probably heard of Agile, which in my opinion doesn't work for web development. It works for software development because you've got a bigger team. You've got, I could go into that forever about why I hate Agile. And actually I've worked on it. I've used it not as the project manager, but been involved on projects where Agile was used. I've never seen it work successfully myself, but it is that's the big one that everybody touts as the most recent. There's also Waterfall, Six Sigma. Yes, Pecha?
I'm really interested in knowing why, because I've had people, actually a woman I interviewed who's a UX designer, and she swears by Agile. She's like, oh, I love it so much. And so I'm really interested in your take on this. I don't want to interrupt the presentation, but maybe it's something we could touch on if there's time at the end, because I'm super interested in that.
Remind me when we get to the end. I have lots of opinions.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll join you, Beth, because I've had a good and a bad experience of Agile, so we can probably shoot the breeze on that one. Carry on.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So what I did was I took the 6 productivity principles for software development that were developed by Keen, which is a consulting firm that I worked for back in the 90s. Yes, I know I'm dating myself. But that was when I was a remote worker, when remote wasn't a thing, right? I didn't meet my boss for 2 years. I never even saw him for the first 2 years I worked for him. But when I worked for Keen, we had these 6 productivity. I mean, it was like a Bible. John Keen even wrote a book about it. And we had to follow it to the letter, all the way from the people in the trenches, all the way up to the top level executives at corporate. And the reason, because it works. And so these 6 principles are: define the job in detail. I added with a content first approach. Get the right resources involved. The original one was get the right people involved, but there's more resources in web development, like themes and plugins and hosting, and to get the right ones involved. Estimate the time and costs, but I've added often, because so many people think that you only have to estimate at the beginning of the project and then everything else is just trying to hit that estimate. No, things change and you need to re-estimate over time. That again is a whole nother topic for a whole nother webinar. Breaking the job down, breaking the thing into manageable chunks, so it's not this big, giant, massive thing that overwhelms your client. Establish and stick to a change procedure. John Keen had established a change procedure, but most people have a change process. The problem is they don't follow their own process. And so that's why I have stick to that change procedure. And then the last one is agree on acceptance criteria. And I have added interim and final acceptance criteria, because it's not just defining the acceptance criteria for the website, but for every deliverable in between. You and the client decide together what is going to make this acceptable. What does done look like for this deliverable? And so you've already decided that. You've already agreed upon what the check mark, what the checklist is. So then when it comes time to approve that deliverable, it is just a checklist. So you don't get into that recurring series of design reviews or whatever, or review of whatever deliverable you're reviewing. And it goes over and over because they find something here and they find something there. But if you've already decided what the criteria is, you don't have to worry about that. So those are the 6 principles we teach in the academy and that my students are getting success with. The next frequently asked question that folks ask is, what's the number one thing that agencies struggle with when it comes to project management? And I alluded to this earlier. It is the content collection bottleneck. I have run survey after survey. I've been in a bazillion Facebook groups. Bazillion might be a slight exaggeration, but I've been in a lot of Facebook groups where this question comes up all the time. And the way that you handle that is, first of all, you start with a content first approach. You make your process as easy as possible. You need to streamline that process, because the easier you make it for the client, the more likely you're going to get, if it's a complicated series of Dropbox folders and emails and different places they have to go to do different stuff, they're just not going to do it, because it's a pain, and they have a business to run. You want to create incentives and penalties. We all create penalties for our client for coming up with change, which is not a good idea either, in terms of anytime there's a change, we're going to charge you this. You have to embrace change, but you also create incentives. What I do sometimes, now this is not a pad, but what I do sometimes is I'll bump the estimate of the project about $500. And then I tell the client, if you meet all the dates that we together agreed upon were the dates, if you meet all those dates, I'll give you a $500 discount or whatever, however.
Where do I sign? Where do I sign?
So
that's right. It makes them much more likely to be focused on those dates.
Beth, this is something else. That is something else that completely resonates with me, because the content first approach is also a design approach. And I'm a big proponent of that, because again, it goes back to the ability to establish a strategy for the business and a strategy for the branding and a strategy for everything, really. And you can't do that without content. And if you do your research properly, you don't need to have word by word the copy. You don't need to even have any copy. That's not what content first means. Would you agree?
No.
I just need to go for a few minutes.
No, I do agree that content drives design. That is absolutely true. Content should drive the design. That is true. But in terms of the development, we don't start developing any of the design outside of wireframes until we get the content. Because sometimes while they're getting that content together, they think of new things, new pages they might need, new layouts. Now I realize I need 3 columns instead of 2, because I only thought I was going to have 2 things on this page, but I really need 3. No. So that's why we do it. We break it down into chunks, and we do each little piece at a time, getting more and more detailed as we go. Design is almost one of the last things we do, Peacha. But we do that. But so we get the content first.
It should be. Absolutely. It should be. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing you have to do is be brutally honest with your client about these kinds of bottlenecks. We try to act to our clients like, well, you know what? I'm so good at this, nothing will go wrong. Nothing will delay our project. And that's what we think we're supposed to present to clients early on. But if you just say, look, we've been doing this a long time, and we know that this always causes a problem. So let me tell you why it causes a problem, and let me tell you the things we have in place so that we're not going to have this problem on our project. That goes a long way of setting your credibility. We think it makes us more credible to try to pretend like we have all the answers, but it really makes you much more credible if you say, look, I don't have all the answers. We're going to try to get them all in this first meeting. But if we don't, we'll we'll work on it later and we'll deal with these processes.
I've been known to do at least 6 discovery meetings at one point because we had to capture anything. And I'd just love to give a quick shout out to a couple of things that have helped us with our projects, which is contentsnare.com. I totally agree grabbing in that content. I love the idea of incentivizing them. I haven't done that one. But also Imogen, she's got the website identity framework as well to help you get content from your clients. So if you want, following what Beth's saying here, get that content, make it easy. Both of those make it easy. Beth, carry on.
Exactly. And James, I teach about Content Snare in my program. James teaches about productivity, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's not the same thing. James teaches about, Zapier and that sort of thing. But Content Snare is his baby, and I am madly in love with this product. You can use it for a million different things too. You can even use it for your initial questionnaire. There's a lot of ways that you can use Content Snare. I love it. And I had Imogen on my program talking about the WIF. That's what we call the Website Information Framework, the WIF. And I'm hoping that she will contribute a lesson. We've had some discussion if she'll contribute a lesson to the Academy. So these are both products that I highly endorse as well. You want to create reminders for your clients with Content
we all
Snare.
endorse.
I'm sorry.
I just wanna add endorsement for the WIP, also for Content Snare, but also for the WIF by Imogen Allen. It's an awesome product, and we all endorse it wholeheartedly.
It really is. It really is. You also want to create reminders for your clients, and Content Snare has that built in, which is fabulous. So you don't have to worry about, did I send that email? Their content's due in 2 days. How much of it do I already have? What email should I send? Content Snare does all that for you. And then also to use wireframes. And this is from software development. Some people use it in web development. Some people don't. And especially with the advent of page builders, people are doing it less and less. They're just throwing all the design and the layout in at the same time. But if you try to combine those two things, it just causes everything to be discombobulated, because you're asking your client for content. They don't know what the spots look like that content's supposed to go. But if you start adding design in, they're going to get distracted by the colors and the layout and the look and the feel. And instead of focusing on, I need 2 paragraphs of content in this spot. So that's why we use wireframes. And I teach way more detail about all of this in the Academy. So our next frequently
basically, this is kind of it's a web design course. He really is. I mean, I'm organizing a design conference called Design for Conversions, and I'm already doing the interviews and so on. And yesterday, because Balsamic, the wireframes tool, are one of the wonderful sponsors that we thank. And yesterday I interviewed their design education guy, Billy. And that's what we're talking about wireframes and how people don't use them enough. And I think that in the WordPress community, especially, there's a tendency to not use them because it's just quicker to jump into Beaver Builder or Elementor or whichever one you use and just build a minimum viable product first, which is all fine if it's a really low budget project, which I understand and I do it all the time. But when it's not low budget and when you have more people involved, guys, wireframes, it just helps even get things out of your mind, and there's no distractions. I mean, we could carry on, but yes, basically what you're describing is just what should be done when you design a website, not just manage a project, guys. So yeah,
exactly. Sorry. Because what you're doing is you're defining for the client all the little boxes for the content that they're going to need to create, or your content copywriter, whoever's doing the content, you're creating the space for that stuff to go, and they need to approve that separately from the design. So yes, I agree 100%. I actually have lessons in the program that teach people how to build wireframes with Elementor or whatever page builder you're using. It's just that you don't use the design elements, you use black and white elements instead. And that can be really helpful, because then if you are using a page builder and it's time to add the design, you just replace that element with the actual design element. So it kind of streamlines the process. But the third-party tools like Balsamic also work very well. There's a lot of people that use that as well as other tools. So it's not the only road to success. So frequently asked question number 4, what else do folks struggle with, and where can project management help? Well, the number 2 thing right behind content is our enemy, scope creep. Now, this is the scope creep WAPU that James Tryon created, and it's an evil monster that we want to avoid whenever we can. It's the enemy of project success.
We can't be scared of that cute little...
It is hard to be scared of it when it looks like a little Pikachu or whatever, but
Yeah.
but he is in a cloak, and
also the typeface is perfect. So
Yes.
there you go. Typeface.
Thank you. I feel so validated, Peacha.
Picture stamp of
You asked
approval.
me to submit my landing page for you to look at because I told you I was redoing it, and I haven't been brave enough to do that yet. So I'm afraid of what you might say. Okay. But what is scope creep? There's some people might not know what that is, but that's when your project slowly moves into work activities and related costs that you didn't previously agree upon with the client. And there are lots of ways that I have a whole session on just scope creep, where we talk about how does that creep happen, because the client can cause it, but a lot of times you can cause it too. So it's just doing anything that you didn't agree to get paid for, and not getting paid for it. So how do you overcome this? And most folks will say, well, if it's not in the scope that we agreed on, then it requires a change order. And that's true, but some of those people still suffer from scope creep because it's not as simple as that. I mean, do you really do a change order for something that's going to take you 15 minutes? Shouldn't you give things like that for free so you over deliver? And we talked about this earlier. The answer is no. So let me give you the 3 simple things you can do and that you must do if you want to control scope creep. And that is establish a change control procedure, a good one, use a change budget, and invoke that change control procedure without exception. A good change control process or procedure, it outlines the process for making changes to the scope, the timeline, the resources, or the cost. Sometimes we change the timeline and it doesn't even change the cost, but that still needs to go through the change control procedure because it gives you that paper trail to know why you extended the date. So the underlying premise.
Suppose with that, sorry, there are other costs though that we, because I always think of the costs of a scope creep being, oh well, that's going to be more work, etc. But sometimes there is also, you said even if there isn't a change in budget or there is at least a change in time, that can still affect the project. That there could be a cost to you in some manner simply because of staff resources, who's away on holiday, what experts do you have? Sometimes we, for example, will hire in a developer for a very specific job. And if the client hasn't provided certain things in time, therefore the schedule goes off, that will actually increase our costs. Therefore, we still have to re-enter I think, what do you call it? I call it a change control, but a scope creep, control scope creep. Is that what you call it? Yeah, so we still have to end up going in there. So we'll always warn our client way ahead of time. We're heading towards that territory if we don't get what we need because our contract with X developer is expiring soon. Sorry, carry on. This is good.
Exactly. So your change control procedure is the procedure that you use to manage the time, the cost, the resources, and the scope. So it's not always about scope creep, but it is a big help with controlling scope creep.
Absolutely,
which is one of the big problems. The underlying premise is embrace change and stop acting like it's something that you need to avoid or something to penalize the client for. Change on a project is inevitable. It's just gonna happen. So stop the crystal ball stuff. Just stop it. If you want your projects to be successful, you need this change control procedure that manages that. Now, a change budget is part of that accepting change as inevitable and planning for it. So when you do your estimate at the beginning of the project, let's say the project you believe is going to cost $5,000. That's just a nice round number. I just picked it out of the air. Then you calculate 20 to 30% of that amount and you establish it into a change budget. Now, this change budget is kind of like a bucket of invisible money. You don't get a deposit on it. You don't charge for it. You don't do anything with that change budget other than get the client to agree to it until a change occurs. You have to have a real definitive, this is where the line is drawn. And after this point, we're done with discovery. And this is where this is where we'll start invoking the change control procedure. Then the client or you, because you could be the one saying, you know what, we planned it this way, but it's going to be better if we do it this other way. So we need to do this change request. And the change request gets submitted to the client with an estimate on how much is that going to cost. If the client submits the change request, the first place it comes to is to you, and you estimate what is that change going to cost. Then the client gets to look at it and go, okay, do I want to take that money out of that change budget and apply it to the project budget or not? And this is one thing that, okay, so Nathan Ingram is a big mentor for me. He is a trainer over on iThemes Training. He's owned a boutique agency for 25 plus years. He's been building websites longer than most of the people doing WordPress now. And also Melanie Adcock is another one who's been doing this for 25 something years. And they heard my talk on the change budget. They added it into their process, and they're getting much greater success now. So that is a real validator for me. I knew it worked in software development, but to have these very seasoned professionals also give this the golden rubber stamp, it really makes it, it really brings it home that this stuff does work, even though it's been around forever. Until you know about it, you don't know you should even be doing it. And then finally, that without exception. It doesn't matter how small the change is, because once you do number 1 for free, they're going to expect 2, 3, and 4 for free too. They have no way to size things. They don't know that changing that one color from violet to darker blue is going to take, across the entire website is going to, depending on how your website's set up, could take a lot longer than they just think, well, it's just that one color, right? So that's why you can't be giving this stuff away for free. Now, some people will say, well, I just pad my estimate to cover change. And let me tell you why that's a bad idea. I have a saying that the pad is bad. And why is the pad bad? The problem with the pad is that you don't know how much it was. You don't know where it is. You don't know what it was used for. It's not measurable. And you can't improve your process if you don't know if you don't have what you can measure. So by having this really strict change control process it helps you get better at estimating. It helps you get better at all the project stuff, because if you did something that caused having to submit a change request, that's kind of embarrassing, but sometimes it happens. Then you can go back at your project and say, okay, here's the mistake we made. Let's institute a best practice so that doesn't happen again. In fact, I answered a question in your group today about that exact thing, Lee, about how do you figure out what lessons I should have learned from this project? And it's by tracking this stuff all the way through the project.
And I love that. The pad is bad.
The pad is bad. Okay, so here's how the change control process works. It starts with a change request. You might initiate it. The client may initiate it. And then it goes to the client to see if it's approved. If it is approved, then the money comes out of the change budget and you get paid. Now, a lot of times I will invoice for that right away. Sometimes I'll add it to the final invoice. If I really trust the client, I know they're going to pay me. But a lot of times, if I'm not sure, I'll just invoice for it right away. Now, this is also how you ensure that you always get paid for everything. Because let's say it wasn't approved, the change request, even maybe it came from the client and they didn't approve it. Well, now you have an opportunity for phase 2, right? You just add all of those things that the client really wants, but they don't want to pay for it right now. And then if you're selected to do the phase 2, you definitely get paid for that work. So that's why I love the change budget. I call it magic. That's what the change budget is magic. Okay. Frequently asked question number 5. What are the most important project management processes to put into place first? At this point, you can probably guess 2 of them. Change control, content collection, and then the last one is acceptance management. And I touched on this previously, but let me break this down just a little bit for you. Okay, so what are the benefits to implementing a good change control process? You get paid for everything. It stops frivolous change requests, because if that client has to say, okay, do I really want to pay $100 to change that color blue? when the color blue has no bearing on their business objective, then it stops that kind of request. And it's going to make you a better estimator over time. The other thing is for content collection, what it does, if you can fix that bottleneck, you're going to finish on time a lot more often, and you're going to do less rework. Because if you implement a content first approach where you're going to get all that content into your content repository before you start work, then you're not going to come across that eventuality where you're halfway through, the client comes up with new content and says, oh, I forgot to tell you, we've got these senior executive bios that need to be on the website, and you don't even have a page for it yet. So now you got to rework things. Or you know how sometimes the design, if you do the design first, then you get the content, then you got to say, oh, wait, we're going to have to redo the design because that doesn't work with the content. So it cuts down on rework. And then for acceptance management, it also gives you fewer revision cycles because you don't get caught up into that, well, I like it, but really like this one thing changed. And then you go through the next review cycle and the next review cycle. You've got a checklist because you've already decided what those acceptance criteria are. And then it makes that final approval way, way easier, especially if you break things down into small chunks. You get each little chunk approved or accepted. And the other reason we don't use approval as much as we use acceptance is because I don't care if you approve of it. We agreed on the criteria. So if it meets that criteria, it's accepted. You can't just say, I don't accept it, because you already agreed that these are the things that we're going to do. Okay, now we've established the most common problems, the 3 most important processes. Now, there are about 7 more important processes, but those are the most 3. And these are the ones we teach. We teach all of them in the academy. Let's look at our next frequently asked question, which is, what is the biggest mistake folks make when it comes to project management? We're about to get short on time here, so I'm going to talk a little faster. But what is the biggest mistake? And it's giving too precise an estimate too early. Now, I'm going to get up on my soapbox here and say, stop giving quotes. Stop giving quotes. We do not give quotes. We give estimates. Quotes are when the fence builder comes to your house. He measures your yard. He knows exactly what the materials are going to cost. He's done this enough. He knows exactly how long it's going to take. It's based on the length of your yard. I can give you a precise quote. But for things that we know that are going to change as we get into the deep dive discovery, or somebody has a good idea along the way, you don't want to squelch that if it's a better idea all along. So what we do is we start with a range estimate. And our first phase of the project is the deep dive discovery. And then we do a second estimate at the end of the deep dive discovery. And then if that second estimate exceeds the first estimate, the first range estimate, there's usually a reason for it that the client is well aware of it. But we do give the client the option to cancel at that point. They hardly ever do because they were with you all along as you went through that deep dive. They know the new things that you found, and they're usually perfectly okay with it.
Quick one as well. I've done this a few times where someone said, roughly what will it cost? And I've tried to say, oh, no, I'm not going to know yet. And then I've dropped the 20K bomb, and that's it. No matter what they say, even if they tell me they want me to build the Sistine Chapel, they will always refer to the fact I said 20K once without any information, and the relationship tends to break down at that point because I can't go no further. So yes, absolutely agree. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I feel about that one. I've had a few experiences of that where I've succumbed.
Quit apologizing for interrupting.
Hey, I'm British. I apologize.
The validation of what I'm saying, just makes it more valuable to the people that are watching.
I was also born in Canada, so it's like a double whammy. Yeah, and you're wearing a check shirt, so you look Canadian.
And the other thing, the other words to avoid is the term accurate estimate. There is no such thing as an accurate estimate. Estimate by itself is fluid. You can give a broad estimate at the beginning and a more precise estimate, but never an accurate estimate. Here's an example of my current client I'm working with. This is a big furniture store. We're home of here in North Carolina, the home of the International Furniture Market. And this is a company that sells market samples after the market is over. And they said that they've got, just like any furniture store, like living room, sofas, blah, blah, blah. They wanted to change what they told me was the categories and the navigation. But what they really meant that I didn't find out until after we started the project, after we started the deep dive. What they really meant was the way most shopping tools behave, which is you go to sofas and then you have filters that allow you to filter down. That's what they really meant, which is a way different thing than we were going to do. We were going to change those first and then add the e-commerce stuff later. But since WooCommerce includes that as part of the plugin, now we're changing the whole order of the project. That's common. Okay. I misunderstood because of the words they were using that I just assumed they knew what they were talking about, and they didn't. So they used the word category when they really meant filter. Categories are easier. Filters are a little harder. And the frequently asked question that I am asked most often is, what is the best tool for project management? And the answer is, drum roll. It depends.
How long's a piece of string, mate?
It depends on your requirements. You would never start building a website for somebody without requirements. So why are you shopping for a project management tool without having your requirements defined? And project management is different for everybody. Just like, what's your name? Lee was talking about earlier, about, do you have a team? Do you not have a team? If you're just a solo person, don't think that you don't need a tool. You do. But you're not doing multiple projects. You're doing one project at a time. You still need a project management tool, but you need a much different tool than somebody who's managing multiple projects. For example, and here's one example that I use commonly when I talk about this, is a Gantt chart. For those of you who don't know what a Gantt chart is, it's where all of your tasks are laid out and you've established dependencies between certain tasks. So if the details of task A move, it automatically moves the other tasks. So that's why for me, my project management tool has to have a Gantt chart. There's lots out there that don't. Also, task management is not the same as project management. Mm-hmm. You can have a bazillion checklists built into your WordPress, your starter site, and you can check those lists off all day. That's not project management. Project management is controlling the scope, the cost, and the timeline and keeping track of it all the way through the project. So these are some of the questions here that you need to ask. And inside the Academy, we have a shopping list that kind of breaks this down for you so you can decide what your requirements actually are and then go shop for a tool. So that's my speech on, and that doesn't apply to just project management tools. Quit asking everybody in the world, what is the best tool for X? Because everybody's got an opinion and it'll just confuse you. Define your requirements first and then start asking people about those specific requirements. That's Absolutely. The way to do it.
Yeah, for example, people will often say, what's the best platform for building my website? And obviously a lot of us are all WordPress fans, but actually WordPress is not always the first port of call. It always depends on the use case. Massive shout out for ourselves. We use Airtable for a lot of our project management internally, but then we also use Basecamp, and we supplement that with something called Project Libre, which is like an open source platform, but that allows us with the Gantt charts to, when we move something, also understand who is off and when, so that not only do the tasks get moved on X days, they also potentially get moved on X weeks if certain resources that are attributed to certain tasks are not available. And that is something that's hard for humans to do on paper. So I want to echo that, absolutely. Gantt charts, it definitely does depend. But if you need that if you've got a big team, you definitely want to look at some of these resources. WPRoadmaps.com, guys, go check it out.
And let me just tell you too that there have been many projects, usually small, uncomplicated projects, that I manage with an Excel spreadsheet, because that's what the client's comfortable with. They're comfortable with working with it. I don't have to do a lot of explanation or onboarding, and it works. So you just put a target Absolutely. Beginning date, target end date, actual beginning date, actual end date, and manage it. So it doesn't always have to be a big, shiny, fancy tool. Okay, here's the last frequently asked question. How can folks learn more about how to manage projects more effectively? Well, I've been mentioning it all the way through, and that is the WP Project Managers Academy. And there are two ways to join. There's a free membership and there's a premium membership. The free membership includes the WordPress Project Management 101 roadmap, but that will help you even if you aren't a WordPress person, but you want to do You want to do, sorry, I got distracted by, I saw Michael Gaberski's name in the comments. This is more, the free program is more of a DIY version. I tell you everything that you need to have and like the elements of a good change control process and all of that. And how to establish those processes that you need to have in place. And that really might be all you need, especially if you have a lot of time to create those sort of things on your own. The premium membership includes not only Project Management 101, but it also includes the complete project management roadmap for WordPress, which has way more done for you templates in it and downloads. And it also includes lessons from subject matter experts. There's a big red arrow.
Who's that? He's good looking.
But these are subject matter experts that I have gathered to teach lessons on all those things that surround project management, all the stuff that comes before, like client acquisition and sales, and then all the stuff that comes after, like care plans and recurring revenue and those sorts of things. So because I don't know everything. You know, like Peacha says, I'm a UI and UX expert. I'm a project management expert. That's what I do. And I build pretty nice websites, but I don't know everything. But I have found these people who do, and they can help you. So they're also in there. And this is what I'm most excited about, is that we recently added certifications. You can actually get certified as a WP Project Manager Level 1 after you've completed the free course. It's just a small one-time charge. And then, or you can, if you join the premium, you'll get both the level 1 and the level 2 is included in your membership. Once you earn these, you can put these badges on your website as more social proof that you know what you're doing. And then when someone clicks on that badge, it pops up and it says what you did to achieve that. So it's really a good, it's clickable. So you can prove what you've done to earn that certification. You're not just throwing something up on your website. Now, the level 2 certification is currently in development, but that's good news for you who are watching this, because until that's done, we are still running our full launch special. So you can enroll in the premium program at $55 a month instead of the new price that we're expecting to be $79 a month after the level 2 certification is added. And you can cancel that program anytime. So even if you're in there for 1 month and you go, you know what, I don't have time to do this, or this is just too difficult, or it's not for me, then you just cancel your membership. So you can cancel that anytime. There's no commitment involved. And I did that to try to keep things reasonably priced. If you're not getting value, I don't want you to stay. If you're getting value, stay as long as you want. Some other things that we have planned is curated content from our subject matter experts that is relevant to project management. Like, I listened to a really cool podcast of Lee's. I'm going to add it to the program so that people can also get the benefit from that as well. And then I'm getting ready to do a detailed case study of all the project management pieces for the project that I'm working on now, which, by the way, is my first 5-figure project. I'm very excited about that.
Nice. Well, speaking of getting more and more value, yep. Last slide. I had some questions for you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Thank you, everyone, for watching my session here. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me at WP Roadmaps on Twitter, Instagram. You can email me at beth@wproadmaps.com, or you can join our Facebook group, which is called WordPress Project Management. It's pretty easy to find. We'd love to have you there. We do ask some entry questions, but that's just to keep the riffraff out. We're not going to save your questions or judge you or anything like that. It just keeps the spammers out. I'm done.
Right. Well, like I said, speaking of extra value, we want to just pull a little bit of extra value. And I noted down to remember Peacha's question. Peacha, you asked, what is the problem with Agile when you've had experiences with, you've heard from other people that it's the best way ever. Beth, have you got any kind of warning shots we should be aware of for Agile? Because it is very trendy to talk about, but I've had bad experience too.
Right. Well, Agile requires a daily stand-up. Okay. That's not practical in our environment, where what a stand-up means is that there's a meeting every single day. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm about zoomed out.
Yes.
No, I can't do any more Zoom calls. It requires a
I just
stand-up.
can't.
it requires assigning someone as the product owner. And their specific rule, it's really the business analyst. They just gave it a different name, but that person has to, and then if you want to do Agile on a project for a client and you tell them that they're doing Agile, they're going to want to see your certification. They're going to want to see that you went out and took this. It's like a day-long course, and now you've got this certification. I'm sorry, but you can't learn anything in a day that gives you some sort of certification. It's discombobulated, right?
I love that word.
Even though they talk about chunking things down, they don't chunk it down in a progressive way like a waterfall. Look, web development is just better under waterfall. And what waterfall means is that you create this deliverable, the client approves it, and that feeds into the next deliverable. And then the client approves the stuff you've added to it. And then you add a little more, and they approve that. That just works better for web development. For software development, Agile does work. But remember, usually in software development, you've got a big team, you've got a trained project manager, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, we had that very similar experience where the person who was responsible for all of those moving parts was not very good at that. So there was miscommunications left, right, and center. Despite the fact we were doing our daily stand-ups, it also meant that the product that we were developing went in the completely wrong direction for a while because, several weeks in a row, we're all focused on this one thing. And then we hit with something else that none of us were aware of that the client brought to the party. So now we're trying to retrofit everything that we had done in the past to work with this new workflow that no one even understood or had explained right from the get-go, because we're like, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that. So, and I don't know if that's part of the Agile process necessarily, or if that was the mistake of the person who was leading, but that really sucked. We developed all of this code based on assumptions we'd made for the first few weeks, and then we had to undo so much kind of midway through the project.
And Agile just creates rework.
Yeah.
It just does because of the way they break it down. And the other thing that I was going to say while you were talking that now has slipped my mind. I forget, but it's just.
Well, you forgot my name as well earlier.
I was going to say, like in a big environment like software development, the entire project team attends that daily stand-up.
Yeah. Your
client is part of your project team, whether you like it or not. You can't have a daily stand-up with your client. So all this work is going on outside of the client. Then you roll the client in, and they go, "Well, wait a minute, just not going to work in our environment," in my opinion. In my humble opinion.
You have another question that came in as well from the community. Why do people not follow through with their change control procedures? I think you said it earlier, actually, that many people have a change control procedure but don't necessarily follow through. What do you think holds people back from saying, yeah, I'm going to put my foot down at this point?
Well, as a woman born and raised in the South, I'm a pleaser. I just want to make my client happy. Yeah. I have to stop myself from doing it, y'all. It's so easy to do. To just say, yeah, I'll just do that. I'm not going to charge you for it. It's just not a good idea. I've learned that over the years. But I think everybody just either wants to be nice, or they want people to like them. So I'll do this for you.
I've lived my life as a people pleaser, I'm afraid. I find
Peter wants me to say y'all again. Hey, y'all.
Thank you. And then I think we've got like maybe 1 minute for another question. What do you think about Trello and Kanban board?
They're great for task management. They're not project management tools. I use Trello, but I don't use it for project management. I use it for task management. But surprisingly, I have found using my Google Calendar for task management is actually working better, because if you put it in as a reminder, it doesn't affect your Calendly link, your Calendly stuff or anything. But if you don't complete it, it automatically moves it to the next day. Oh. And then I have to figure out, okay, I didn't get it done yesterday. Where am I going to put it today? And I'm finding that very helpful.
Google Calendar does this.
That's what I've meant. Google Calendar does that. If you use the
Why
reminder,
doesn't it do that for me?
You have to use the reminder function, not the task function and not the event. You have to use the reminder. And then it shows up on your calendar with a little finger with a ribbon around it.
That's pretty cool. I did not know this in years and years of using Google Calendar.
No, me neither. That's perfect.
I just discovered it because I'm renovating my house. I'm going on vacation. I've got a new project. That's my first I keep saying 6 figures. It's 5 figures. My first 5-figure project. So I've got all these things, all these little teeny pieces I need to get done. And I keep my Google Calendar open all day. So why not just put them over there? So I tried this and I was like, oh, it automatically moved them to the next day. And so then I just redistribute what time of day I'm going to do them. And I get a lot more done that way. But yeah, I love Trello.
Awesome.
I think it's great. Kanban boards are fine, but they're not project management.
Well, we're now at that point where I need to do my final thoughts, just like Jerry Springer used to do all those years ago. And there's a couple of big things that hit out for me there. And one of them was a bit of a food for thought. Have you tried the crystal ball method of pricing? Because I know I have, which is very much here in the UK. That when somebody says, well, how much is that going to cost? We'll either say, yeah, well, how long's a piece of string? Or we'll lick our finger and put our finger in the air. That is not the best way to price a project. So that was a big takeaway for me. Another food for thought here is, have you got risk mitigation for your projects, very much around things like the change control procedures, etc. And it was a real good point that Beth made with regards to people pleasing. I've actually found that by trying to please people, I upset them way more than I do if I actually I'm honest and I say, no, actually that is going to cost, or that is going to put us back, or that is going to be a problem. And this is what we need to do about that. So rather than trying to please people, let's actually help them by being honest, being forthright, and sticking to those procedures that we have. There was another one that made me chuckle, which is the pad is bad. Actually, let's rely on those change control procedures or those scope creep changes. There's lots of different ways of saying. We've always said change control here. It means a whole load of things. But the pad is bad. No matter what it is, actually put it through that procedure, even if it's a shift in your schedule. Don't just hope that you will throw enough cash into the pot to break even or to make a profit at the end of your project, but actually as you go, let that project evolve, so you, the client, everybody can learn on it. You all know what you're paying for. You'll know what you're going to get at the end of it. And last one takeaway from me that made me cry a bit inside, because it reminded me of all of those times I've done this, is avoid making those early estimates before discovery. Do not finger in the air. Oh, it could be about 20K, because they're going to hold you to that 20K, even if they want the Sistine Chapel and you thought you were quoting on a shed. Just telling you. All right. So, folks, that has been us. If you want to find out more about Beth and her wonderful academy and get certified, please check out wproadmaps.com. I also encourage you to go ahead and check out her Facebook group, as well as the GoWP Facebook group. You're very prevalent in there as well. It's one of my favorite groups to hang out in. Design for Geeks is another group to go hang out in, and my own as well, Agency Trailblazer. Let's not forget, if you are a Cloudways client or a wannabe Cloudways client, then check out the Cloudways users group as well. Let's quickly do our round robin of how to connect with each other on the socials, and then we will wave goodbye. Let's start with you, Beth.
At WP Roadmaps on Twitter, Beth at WP Roadmaps email, and I'm WP Roadmaps on Facebook.
Awesome. I'm at ATB Community on Twitter, or you can find me on agencytrailblazer.com. Peacher.
I am at Peacher on Twitter, which I always love to say. It's like me and Jack, you know. and then I'm Peachanary on LinkedIn. Basically, if you learn how to spell my name, that's it. You can find me anywhere. I'm never going to be able to get rid of you. Yeah,
I had to throw my middle name in just to be unique. There's so many Lee Jacksons out there. One sells maps, one writes books. Oh, they're everywhere. One makes amps. Go Google my name. It's hilarious. Folks, before you do that, though, again, check out wproadmaps.com. Check out the academy. Check out those certifications. Check out all the wonderful content that Beth and the community that she's built around her have put together. Beth, thank you so much for your time. This has been Getting Started with Project Management in Your Agency with Beth Livingston from WP Roadmaps. That was an amazing ending. Let's just finish there with an awkward wave.
Perfect.
Thank
Cheerio,
you. I had a
folks.
great time. This was great fun. It's so good to see you both again.
We'll see you again soon. Oh, what? Do you want to do one more y'all?
Bye, y'all.
Hey! Take care, guys.